From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
National Public Data Records Leak. What does it really mean? Texas sues GM for sale of driver data, and Orion, manufacturer of the color black, loses $60 million in BEC scam. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected from this past week's cybersecurity headlines. And like a power loom weaver, we've taken the individual threads of each of these stories, we've put them all together into a beautiful canvas, and now we get some insight, opinion, and expertise from our returning guest, Edwin Covert, the head of cyber risk engineering at Bowhead Specialty. Edwin, thank you so much for making the time, for getting ready to drop some knowledge. I'm super excited to run down the news today.
I am thrilled to be back, and I gotta tell you, I'm gonna start doing some real research on power loom weaving. It's might be my new favorite thing.
It looks like a fascinating topic. We may have to re-architect this show around it, but we're not going to do that today, mostly because we've made a commitment to our sponsor for today, ThreatLocker, Zero Trust Endpoint Protection Platform. Remember to join us on YouTube Live. To do so, go to CISOSeries.com, hit the events drop-down, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image. It is on that page. You will find it. It's no problem. We don't obscure it in any way. You can click on it to join us and have a good time. You can join everybody in our chat. I see CCL, I see J. Walter Smith and Kevin Farrell all hanging out there. We hope we get some of their comments and opinions throughout the course of the day. And if you join our chat, you can get those in and have a lot of fun. We're going to dive right into the show. Just a quick reminder, though, that Edwin's opinions are his own and not necessarily those of his employer. I can't wait to get into those opinions. Here's our first story. Looking into the National Public Data Records Leak. There is a phrase used by Lewis Carroll in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, much of a muchness. It seems to definitely fit the story. We covered the Jericho Pictures National Public Data Leak last week on this show, specifically around the class action lawsuit. Now that seems that data is not as complete as was first made out. We know this because Troy Hunt of Have I Been Pwned dug into all the files. He went into them, was looking at samples. I mean, it's a lot of rows of data, but he was doing the hard work. And he says that the 2.9 billion number that was put out there actually refers to rows of data, not individuals, and that these included social security numbers and names, but that many of these were duplicates or of deceased people. Still a lot of information out there, but not 2.9 billion people. Some people were questioning that number. He also found 134 million unique email addresses, and those were not tied to any of the email addresses. So it was not it was a little bit more disparate of a data set than we were first led to believe. But Ed, the data such as it is now up for sale on a dark web marketplace, and National Public Data, like we mentioned last week, is facing a class action lawsuit. There still seems to be some lingering problems around the story, such as the fact that data was scraped from non-public sources and it was still stolen from a company, and that the data, even of deceased people, can still be used by bad people to do bad things. A lot of floating parts to this. What is your take on all of this?
So, I for one, I don't know about you, but I am shocked that there was a quick knee-jerk reaction to this story without all the details coming in. We don't. That's not normal for our industry. So I'm a little shocked to see that. It's interesting because, and I love Have I Been Pwned. I use it quite a bit. Actually, I get alerts from them on a regular basis. But I did look up myself in a different set of data for the NPD stuff, and I'm in there. It is data from 22 years ago, right? Because I was still living in Monterey, California, still in the Navy at the time. Is the record that they have for me. Now that I go contrast that with my wife, I looked her up, and they have like 7 or 8 different entries for every time she's moved around LA. So it's a weird thing. Look, I lived through the OPM hack back in the day, so at this point, my data is out there. It's there's not a whole lot else I can do about it. I mean, it's the world that we live in, and I try not to stress about things that I can't control.
And one of the other interesting things about this is initially the NPD, certainly they were not the ones that were doing the malicious leaking, right? But they get a little bit of a side eye, I feel like, in the story as a data aggregator, not exactly a beloved entity by the general public. The one thing of credit is that no one that opted out of data collection had their data in that data set. So even if they did not do a good job, of securing that data. I'm not saying that we don't know the specifics of it. We just know that that data is out there. At least they were following their legal obligations with that data. So, like, if there's a silver lining, it's data aggregator seemed like they were kind of at least dotting their I's and lowercase J's. I mean, that's kind of positive.
I think it is a positive, and I think we should give credit where credit is due in this very limited circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
The data broker marketplace it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they're the root of all evil, but at the same time, they're not my favorite.
I would not be heartbroken if they get regulated sometime soon.
Right. And I think there are actually movements afoot in some of the states, particularly my state of California, to do some of that. But to your point, if you opt out, which I almost invariably do because I live in California, so I get all those lovely messages saying, "Oh, you're in California. Would you like to opt in or opt out?" And I'm like, "No, I'm opting out." Clearly, I didn't do that 22 years ago when I lived in California, but
times change.
Yeah. So,
all right. Well, moving on to our next story. U.S. operation of a laptop farm for North Korea shut down. Tennessee resident Matthew Newt has been arrested for allegedly running a laptop farm to help North Korean IT workers secure remote jobs with American companies. Newt would steal the identities of U.S. citizens and pose as U.S.-based IT professionals. Once hired, the company would send the work laptop to Newt's home, which he then gave North Koreans access to, allowing them to log in remotely. If convicted, Newt would face up to 20 years in prison, including a mandatory minimum of 2 years for aggravated identity theft, which I discovered is, in fact, a crime. So, Edwin, we chose to play this story directly after National Public Data because this seems seemingly like a lone wolf operative using data for other people to assist an adversarial nation state in its goals. There's a definite Timothy McVeigh feel kind of to this story. At least, I don't know. That was the vibe I got. In this case, he was found, arrested, and sentenced, but likely not the only one doing this because it turns out people like money. This brings us to the place where the need for ongoing federal vigilance of U.S. citizens and residents goes up against personal freedoms and, the calls for less government overreach. A really kind of fascinating look into something that I'm sure is happening in other places. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know that I get Tim McVeigh vibes from this. I'll be honest. I think that might be
bridge too far.
Yeah, I'm not willing to go there. But again, I am shocked that people like money, so I don't really know how to how to address that. But at the same time, and I don't have all the details of the story, so I don't want to put things, into the story that aren't there. But companies would hire him, as I understand, or they think they're hiring somebody.
Yeah, he would steal their identity, and because he had a U.S. Basis, it was easier for him to assume those identities.
Gotcha. So then he's buying these laptops, or he's getting these laptops.
He's getting the laptops from the company.
People are RDPing into him or something. Is that how it works?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's a certain level of genius to do that, but also illegal. Don't do it. Don't interact. It's against the law to support North Korea, as I understand federal OFAC.
Yes. We are in no way advocating for hacking for North Korea.
I think the bigger issue is companies need to be doing, and I don't even know how to begin to think through this, but more due diligence on the people that they're hiring. Mm-hmm. And it's hard, particularly during the pandemic when you couldn't actually meet your employees face to face. Everyone was remote working. But you should be able to have some way to actually interact with somebody. And of course, then you run into issues. We were talking in the editorial meeting about the ChatGPT face thing, right, for your camera.
Yeah.
That you could theoretically look like somebody else very quickly to, So I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum, but I think it ultimately comes down to companies doing more due diligence on the people they hire.
CCL in the chat says maybe his outsourced employee in China outsourced the work to North Korea. That's the only way this story could get, I think, more convoluted. But yeah, this is kind of going back to, obviously insider risk is a huge part in any cybersecurity program, right? Like this is not an unknown phenomenon. But again, I'm going back to something I said. I read this piece by Andy Ellis in CSO Online, and he had this point of like, we need to apply zero trust to our own internal IT tools much more frequently. And I feel like when you have one, the ability for someone to do this, and two, kind of making it trivial to overcome, the webcam, like the identity verification, that kind of instinct. I feel like there needs to be more of that. We have a story, I think, that will run analogous to this later in the show as well.
That's I don't want to push back on Andy because he's brilliant, but
I may be not giving the nuance that he deserves.
But it's just, I'm thinking through zero trust. Why, if you're not doing it on everything, then you're not really doing it, right?
This is what we call the zero trust conundrum.
Hmm.
All right, next up here, Texas Attorney General sues GM for sale of driver data. Ken Paxton has filed a suit in the State District Court of Montgomery County for false, deceptive, and misleading business practices. His statement accuses General Motors of selling consumers a comprehensive surveillance system that unlawfully records information about every drive they take and sells their data to any company willing to pay for it. According to Politico, this is the first state lawsuit against an automaker for privacy violations. Tector does hasten to point out that both Republican and Democrat legislators have historically fought against passing comprehensive federal or state privacy protections that may protect consumers from this type of exploitation. Politicians of all stripes, of course, well known for jumping on ideological bandwagons, despite the fact that they themselves voted against the very measures they are now protesting. Given that GM has 18 facilities in Texas and employs nearly 9,000 people, do you find Paxton's complaints to have merit, or at least can cause some trouble for old GM?
Well, so anybody who knows me can probably figure out that I am not a fan of Ken Paxton's version of politics. But on the theory of credit where credit is due, I think he's absolutely on the mark here. I think this is, if we're not going to do federal privacy requirements or federal data protection requirements, it becomes a states' rights thing. So then the state actually needs to do something. And in this case, the AG is doing something. And I think he's right. I mean, the cars are selling, the car company is selling this data to data brokers. Let's take it full circle, right? It's not great. And I applaud him for doing it. I really do. I think it's the right move.
What is, though, I mean, I'm sure GM will come and say, one, this is a misrepresentation of our data practice, but two, in the sales purchase of this car, in line 5,677 of our privacy policy, it says by turning on the car, you give GM the authority, or by opting into a certain set of features or something like that. I'm curious, we can set up those privacy protections, maybe give more visibility into this practice. I don't know what we can do to stop it when we've become inured to, click to accept cookies, or, any number of dialogues. When you start, like when I start my car, I have to click through like two menus to get to the base screen on my Honda. So I feel like this is going to be like the browser selection screen of legislation. That's my fear, I guess, is this maybe legislation down the road, or a lawsuit pressure from states can provide visibility, but I don't know if that changes the practice.
Well,
on its face.
It might, though. I mean, let's go back to California, right? I mean, when California put CCPA in, that changed how websites collect data and what they can do with it.
That's true,
right? And the CPRA did the same thing. So I think it's possible to do it. I mean, so let's take another Texas thing that they're doing. I don't know the legal status of it right now, but they tried to put in a filter to block Pornhub if you were coming from an IP address in the state of Texas. So clearly there are things that can be done, not to conflate the two things, but there are state level things that can be done. So I don't know. I think it's worth a shot if we're not going to get federal privacy regulations anytime soon, which it doesn't seem like we are. Now, J. Walter Smith's comment here about the punishment being meted out, that's a whole separate issue. I don't disagree with them. We need to be, if I can go to jail for something, there should be something a little more pressing for companies to be able to get punished with as well.
Unfortunately, we've seen kind of the opposite of that. I know Illinois just passed a change to their biometric privacy law, essentially giving it less teeth over time, making it more business friendly, not letting violations kind of stack up and limiting it to per person. So my other fear would be if something like this does pass, down the road, it gets kind of, the edges of it get smoothed off and it becomes less meaningful over time. Again, that's all hypothetical. Yeah. One thing that's not hypothetical, though, is our appreciation for our sponsor for today, and that is ThreatLocker. Do zero-day exploits and supply chain attacks keep you up at night? Worry no more. you can harden your security with ThreatLocker. ThreatLocker helps you take a proactive, default deny approach to cybersecurity and provides a full audit of every action allowed or blocked for risk management and compliance. Onboarding and operation are fully supported by their US-based support team. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help keep your organization running efficiently and protected from ransomware, visit threatlocker.com. That's ThreatLocker.com. NIST releases first 3 finalized post-quantum encryption standards. The U.S. Department of Commerce's National Institute of Standards and Technology, we know it as good old NIST, has finalized its principal set of encryption algorithms designed to withstand cyber attacks from a quantum computer. In a release dated last Tuesday, NIST stated the algorithms are specified in the first completed standard from NIST Post-Quantum Cryptography, or PQC, standardization project and are ready for immediate use. So, Ed, let's focus on that term immediate use here. What have you seen in your travels that show that organizations are indeed ready to immediately use PQC in their environments?
Nothing. Next topic.
Okay.
No.
There is no one that's flipping the switch for PQC right now.
No. And so I teach this class, this college class, and one of the topics we discuss is wireless encryption. Mm-hmm. And I take them through sort of the history of the Wi-Fi encryption standards and where we're at. We're at, most of us have WPA2 now rolled out, right? There is a WPA3 and it's been out for a couple of years. The problem is it requires hardware replacements. And so it's very hard to roll out in instant use mode, new things like this. So I applaud NIST. I love NIST. I think they're doing the Lord's work in so many ways, and I encourage everyone to really dig into like the cybersecurity framework and make use of it as best you can. But this is important work to do as well. But we're not ready yet. We're just not there yet. We're not ready for instantaneous deployment of any of this stuff. It's going to take several years for us to roll this new configurations, the new hardware required to make it work, all that stuff out.
Well, and I feel like outside of either highly regulated or, the most security conscious companies, right? The question becomes like, why should we allocate budget to this now? Where, who has the quantum computer now, right? That's breaking this. Right. There will be some forward thinking organizations like Apple and Zoom. I want to give them plaudits for kind of being ahead of the, ahead of the curve on this, at least rolling out some post quantum considerations in their cryptography. And I'm sure we'll see other large players do that, but I imagine that is a difficult conversation to have for something that still is a little bit on the science experiment side and not quite, I guess a more pressing concern, I guess.
Yeah, it's an edge case right now. Is how I look at it. So it's not a master use case.
All right. And we are going to move on, I think, to our last story of the day. We're just having such a good time here, Ed, with you and just digging into all these stories. I know. And this one definitely got my attention. Orion loses $60 million in BEC scam. Luxembourg-based company Orion is a leading supplier of carbon black material used to make tires, ink, batteries, and plastics. The company was tricked into making several wire transfers through a business email compromise, or BEC attack, one of the classics. According to documents filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission, a non-executive employee was the target of a criminal scheme that resulted in multiple fraudulently induced outbound wire transfers to accounts controlled by unknown third parties. So, Ed, the story echoes the famous Hong Kong deepfake heist from earlier this year. In both cases, the money was moved through several transactions. We know that BEC is serious and a successful threat. Again, it's usually at the top 2 of ways threat actors are being bad. But are we seeing a deficiency in the process of approval here? Like, if you launch a missile, shouldn't there be a process where more than one person has to turn the key at the same time? Is this a process problem given the advances in technology we're seeing?
Yes, this is a process problem. This is not a cyber problem in my mind. I mean, all things are cyber problems realistically, because that's the world I live in. But this is a process. There should have been, first of all, $60 million. So it's not pennies. That somebody had to approve that. And if I have the ability, unless they're doing, I don't know, $600,000 $100 transfers, right, where there's a small amount, I suspect this went out in large chunks of change. So somebody should have been in the pipeline to say, oh, wait, hold on, where is this going again? And like, I can't even get approval to buy a laptop in my company without first filling out the form, going through the process, and then literally the payable people will call me on my cell phone and say, hey, is this really something that we need to pay for, or is this a scam? They're terrified of sending, $3,000 out. So good on our accounts payable people. But I don't understand how 60 million gets lost.
That's the thing. It's like, this is what the bureaucracy is for, right? Is like, it's a pain in the butt when you want to use it for something legitimate, but like it's to provide all of these procedural speed bumps to prevent something like this from happening. I guess for Orion, maybe they just, I can't imagine they don't have the same bureaucracy as any complex company would have. But that's a really fascinating point. I guess I hadn't thought about like quite that angle on it.
Yeah, it's I feel bad for this non-executive, probably former employee at this point. But
if not, they had the best teachable moment.
Yes, he's $60 million.
I am never going to do that again.
Teachable.
I believe that person too. All right. Well, we have to be starting to close down the show here, but we had some awesome comments in our chat today. We couldn't get these all up, but J. Walter Smith really, when we were talking kind of about privacy legislation, bringing up, the equivalent of handing a crying child something shiny to giggle and chase around with it. That really spotted a fun conversation in the chat here. And don't worry, J. Walter Smith, you are not being overly cynical. We appreciate your completely appropriate cynicism in our chat, joining CCL and Kevin Farrell in there and having some fun. We also
it's the right amount of cynicism. I think.
Yes, if you are not to some degree cynical, I don't trust you. And David Cross appreciating, and Andrew, producer Andrew, appreciating my cat shirt. I didn't wear it to be appreciated, but it is nice to be appreciated. So thank you for, if you're not watching the video, I'm wearing a shirt with cats on it. And you should watch the video. How dare you? Before we get out of here, Ed, was there any story this week in the news that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you?
So I had one I thought was going to be an eye roll, and it turns out it's not, the more I think about it. But so it was in HelpNet Security this morning.
Okay.
And the 74% of IT professionals worry AI tools will replace them. That's not that caught my attention. What caught my attention is that 56% of security professionals are concerned about AI-powered threats, according to the survey. And so my first thought, my eye roll thought was, well, what are the other 44% worried about? Why are they not worried about this? And then it occurred to me, I was having a discussion with a CISO from a law firm here in LA, and he said something that's just it sticks in me, and it says, don't come to me with AI concerns until we can get the basics done, right? If you can't do asset management, user management, incident response properly, the ability to recover, don't come to me with an AI problem yet. We haven't even figured out the common problems. So that's when it went from eye roll to okay,
yeah. Let's get above the poverty, the cybersecurity poverty line, and then we'll worry about that. That's a really, I don't know if that makes me feel better that there's possibly 40% of people that don't feel that they're on there, but it does help contextualize how to, when we hear about all of these threats, AI-based threats coming, to kind of, hey, let's get our house on a firm foundation before we start worrying about, meteors falling from the sky or something.
There you go.
My analogy is quite tortured. Thank you.
No, I like it. I dig it.
All right. Before we get out of here, Ed, where can people find more about you if they want to follow you on the cyberspace?
As far as I know, I'm the only Edwin Covert in LinkedIn land. And then I do have my own website at edwincovert.com where, stuff I've written and that sort of thing. So
fantastic. Well, both those in our show notes. You should definitely give him a follow, if nothing else. Well, thank you so much, Edwin Covert, the only Edwin Covert.
I think there is an Ed Covert, but I think I'm the only Edwin Covert.
No, we're gonna take that person off. If there's another one, we'll get him off.
No, he's a lovely person, I'm sure.
Well, thank you for lending your expertise as the head of cyber risk engineering over at Bowhead Specialty. Really, really appreciate your time. We will have to have you back on again for a third time appearance. You get a jacket if you do that, so they'll be very excited. Producers note we need to figure out how to get a jacket. Thanks also to our sponsor, ThreatLocker, Zero Trust Endpoint Protection Platform. Visit them at threatlocker.com. That's ThreatLocker.com. Also, thanks to our audience today at the lively chat room. Again, can't get everyone up on the screen, but I really do enjoy seeing the great conversations that are happening, that they make our conversations better. We're reading them. We're taking all your best points and then acknowledging some of them. I'm just kidding. We give credit where credit is due. Thank you so much for participating. And if you haven't joined us for a live chat, you definitely need to. And you can do that next week. We've got a couple of opportunities to be part of a live CISO Series activity. The first one is going to be our Super Cyber Friday, which is going to be hacking the future of pen testing, an hour of critical thinking about how to continuously manage your threat exposure. That's at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then at 3:30 Eastern, we'll be back with another episode of the Week in Review. Of course, you can get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. It's not live, but I promise you, it's also fun. Until the next time we meet, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.